tonight is a special confession night, and we're here to make some abject confessions and have other fun and games, which I'm sure that all of you will enjoy. That's fine, George. And also, by way of a disclaimer, that tonight's show has sinister overtones, which may prove to be offensive, if not downright disturbing, to many of you deep-type thinkers out there. So we'd like to suggest you move down to the other spot on the dial where they're doing something a little more in keeping with your heavy intellectual attainments. We don't want to offend anybody here. Bring it up, big man. Right, there you go. Very good. Listen, I'm still, I'm still kind of nervous because of what happened the other night. And you mean you don't know what happened the other night? It was a bad scene. I was in this place. I was traveling around, and I was in this motel. And I rarely turn on television sets when I'm traveling. To me, I like to get away from it, I rarely turn them on in motels. And I turned on this television set. And it goes, how those sets go, and the picture flops over about 28 times, and suddenly it stops. I'm looking at it. Oh, my God, no. Out of my ancient past. Count Dracula. I'm looking at Dracula. Now, I want to tell you something about this Dracula bit. I was affected very heavily at the age of about 9 by watching Dracula. And I can't honestly tell you that I'm ever scared by a horror movie. But horror movies to me have a peculiar fascination because of the way they do things. Some movies can be have one moment that's fantastically horrible. Like I saw a trilogy that was made here a few years ago in color, and Boris Karloff was like the running character that ran through it. He introduced these things on the screen. You remember when they used to have anthologies, like trilogies? Do you remember Somerset Maugham's 5, various short stories done like little one-act plays? Well, Dracula is one of the great classic horror figures of all time. And this character exists, when you say Dracula, everybody knows who Dracula is. Do you know the guy that played Dracula, Bela Lugosi, a famous Hungarian, I guess he was Hungarian or Romanian, but famous actor, that when he died a few years ago, he specified in his will that he be buried in the full insignia and regalia and the cape of Count Dracula. And that's going to be fascinating for some anthropologist about 105,000 years from now when they dig that up. See what the hell that is. And he has this cross and all that business. And I, of course, at that point, when I first saw Count Dracula, I was heavily influenced by that because we had a lot of bats in our neighborhood. Now, a lot of people never see bats. A bat is a theory to most people. But if you live in a neighborhood where they actually have bats, flying around bats, you tend to think maybe there is something to this Dracula scene. In fact, when I was in the Amazon, they have vampire bats there. Now, every time you see Dracula, you know those bats that fly in and out of Dracula, those big vampire bats, big, huge things? Well, that bat is not really the vampire bat. The big ones that they show in these horror mysteries really are fruit bats. They don't do anything except eat peaches. Those big bats. They eat peaches, and they look horrible. Oh, they're bad news. The real vampire bat is about the size of a mouse, or smaller. And they're really deadly. In fact, in the Amazon, the vampire bat, you had to sleep in a special kind of mosquito netting and that to keep the bats out. And the way the vampire bat works in the Amazon, in fact, they had the chickens. When I was with this tribe of headhunters, they'd keep the chickens in a special little teepee. It was like a little tiny A-frame made out of logs that was especially built to keep bats out. And these guys would build these things up on little stilts, and the bats would supposedly stay away from the chickens. But a group of vampire bats can kill every chicken within miles, and all the kids, too. You know how they do it. You know how a vampire bat works. Don't you know how they work? Well, what happens is you're asleep. They always get you in your sleep. And the bat comes sneaking up on you, and he bites you. He may just fly right over, and he'll bite like your ear or your nose or your toe, some exposed part. They generally go for your ear, your nose, your toe. Primarily the tip of your nose, curiously enough, because of a lot of biological reasons. But anyway, he just goes nip like that. And as he does so, he makes these two little punctures, just like a little hole in your skin. And as he does, he injects an anticoagulant in your nose, which means that the blood isn't going to coagulate. And you start to bleed in your sleep, and it's very painless. The blood just runs down and dribbles all over the place, and you're just laying there bleeding to death. And all the other bats then show up. About 5 million bats show up, and they gather around this pool of blood, and they drink the blood. And the next morning they find you, and there you are, you're drained as dry as a gourd. That's it. And old Charlie's been sucked dry. And it's an evil thought, but that's what a bat does. Now, the other day, the only reason I bring this up, I'm sitting in this motel, and on comes Count Dracula. Well, I thought about Dracula, see. And do you know I discovered the other day, I'm sitting in a bus station, and I've got this old newspaper, I'm looking at this thing, waiting for somebody, and I read that Count Dracula existed. He was not a myth. Count Dracula was real. Any of you have ever seen this terrible, scary movie? He was a real character. And I read to you the bit, and I check it out. Osgood Carruthers wrote this. He's a writer, Los Angeles Times Service, and it's headed Count Dracula was for real. And its dateline, Braslav, Romania. Yes, Virginia, there was a Dracula. Imagine this guy, there really was a Dracula, or a reasonable facsimile. And to the inhabitants of these brooding mountains of Transylvania, he was a good guy. A bit ruthless, but the good guy, who protected the forebears of present-day Romanians against the Turks, the Hungarians, and Germanic tribes. Incidentally, I have been in that part of the world. And I want to tell you this, you can understand how people, I think literature springs out of the physical surroundings of people, even if they don't consciously write about the physical surroundings. If you've ever seen the mountains of that part of the world, it's a strange thing about them. They're not high, craggy mountains of the kind like, say, the Rockies. They're kind of strange, rolling, wooded hills, mountains, and the sky is gray a great deal of the time there for some reason or other. Every time I've seen it, it's gray, and there's great, fantastic forest there. And there is a curious, spooky, brooding quality. In fact, I remember feeling that same feeling one night driving a car. Have you ever been in a place that in itself is spooky? Driving a car between Innsbruck and Munich over the Tyrol there, the Alps. And I was in this little tiny car, little German car, and driving through these little villages, and this is the heart of the Black Forest region, and driving along, and by God, I wasn't driving more than like 20 minutes, and I was not only believing in elves and gnomes, I was seeing elves and gnomes. It's scary. And then I had this insane moment when I'm driving. It's about midnight, see, and I'm approaching this little town. Now, the woods were absolutely Stygian black on both sides of me. And the mountains stretched up on both sides and went right to the world's ceiling, just up. And there was nothing but blackness, real blackness. And these, if you've ever seen the Black Forest, you know why they call them the Black Forest. It really is black. And I'm putting along in this little car, not a soul anywhere around me. It was in late fall. And the foliage had changed, and all the tourists were gone, and there was nothing except blackness, this one little road. And this car was driven by a Schick shaver motor, roughly. It couldn't go anywhere. The little thing it's about 5,000 miles to the gallon of gas. but that's because it didn't do anything, and it hardly moved. Flat out, I'd get maybe 17, 18 miles an hour, and it had two little candles for its lights in the front. And I'm driving along, ice cold. Oh, was it cold in this car? No radio, nothing. The two little seats were like made out of canvas slings. And I'm going through the black forest all by myself. And I see nothing but blackness all around me. These two little yellow lights, which I have out in front of me, are lighting up the space of the road, maybe 6 or 7 feet, just ahead of me. That's it. Well, I'm coming into a town. Now, I only know there's a town there because I know it's on the map, and I also saw a sign in German that said I was approaching Mittenwald, which means middle of the forest. Middle of the forest. Mittenwald. This is speaking Lost in the Woods. This is WOR, New York. Friends, we've been lost in the woods for years. Yeah. And I'm drifting along, on this road. I guess everybody in this time, it's I don't know. I think that only man is capable of that kind of fear. I don't think animals walking around ever look in the forest and see fear. Well, I'm driving along this road, and when this moment happened, this is a moment I'll never forget, because I was kind of on edge. It was late, and I had gotten a late start from Innsbruck. Now, Innsbruck, if you have a map, you can take a look at it. Innsbruck lies just on the other side of the mountains from Munich. And between Innsbruck and Munich rise these great Alps. And there's a pass that goes between the two. And you drive literally through the mountains to get to Munich, which lies on the other side of the mountains. And it lies down on a kind of plain. And Innsbruck is a spooky kind of city anyway. It's a medieval city. It has arched walkways. You walk along a narrow cobblestone walk, and it has these arches. And during the tourist season, it's a great place. Everybody digs it. But in the off season, it has a certain mysterious black brooding quality. It's a strange place. And the people look at you with an odd look. I remember going into this hotel, and it had this fantastic room. It's like out of an old David Niven movie. This old hotel with this strange decor, great hanging chandeliers, and these waiters with black suits came around. And we're not used to that kind of thing in America very often. And it's a very different kind of way of doing things. And all around me, seated at respectable distances, were sort of sinister-looking elderly ladies with dewlaps. Dewlaps? Don't you know what a dewlap is? That's a jowl, in case you're interested. It's a hanging jowl. You don't know what a jowl is? How the hell did you get your job? But these women look like powdered basset hounds, sitting at respectful distances, saying nothing to each other, and being served by waiters who apparently had been serving them for 500 years. It had a certain timeless quality, and there was silver salvers and trays, and they were pushing things around in little carts with silver-spoked wheels, and bringing out the strange-looking bottles of wine with dust on them. And up on the stage were these 3 elderly men playing violins. One guy actually, they weren't all 3 playing. 2 of them were playing violins, and the middle one was playing what looked like a clarinet. And it was this Middle Europa world. And they're playing along, they're playing waltzes and things. And it was a huge place, roughly the size of Lincoln Center. And there must have been 10 of us eating at great spaces. We were spaced out. It was like last year at Marienbad. And this is a movie. And I have to keep giving you footnotes so you're not totally confused. And so I'm sitting in this place feeling like some kind of an oaf because I had just dropped in. There was only a little sign outside that said in German, or in Austrian, really, it just said restaurant. And so I went in. I was hungry. And I found myself in this thing. And these ladies all looked, and I could see that nobody spoke any known language. They spoke some kind, well, apparently some kind of a barbaric version of a romantic gypsy language. And the guy starts to play a peculiar kind of march. Sounded a little bit like some kind of funeral march. And the waiter comes over and he says something in German, and I tried to talk to him in English. I said, may I see the menu? And he says, ja, das ist menu. And he brings me the menu, grudgingly, as if I had intruded into this secret rite that was about to begin. And so I looked at the menu, and it's completely, well, it wasn't really just German. It was also in a strange kind of script, because I can get my way through German all right, especially in the eating department. But it was written out in purple ink. And yes, that's one of my basic advices to you. Stay away from restaurants that write out their menus in purple ink in longhand. You're going to get shucked like a ear of corn, friend. They'll peel you and leave you off to dry. So I looked down this menu, and I couldn't really recognize anything, and I realized that he wasn't about to tell me what any of this stuff was. And so without any, you got to plunge in, you got to eat something. And I knew that no matter what I ordered, it was something to eat. See? So I pointed to this, and his eyebrows raised. I says, das ist, ja, this, yeah. And he says, jawohl. And I could see his eyes sort of glimmer. It's the first time anybody's ordered turtle heads in a long time, And so he goes scuttling off. And I see a couple of waiters in the corner talking and looking over in my direction. Incidentally, one of my favorite writers of all time is a late writer who died a few years ago named Ludwig Bemelmans, who wrote about this kind of world. He wrote a great series, particularly a book called Hotel Splendide, which is of this European strange world. It's the kind of world you can imagine an infinite number of Greta Garbos have come for their parsley salad. And sit mysteriously brooding upon a spectacular past with a countess and a Romanian nobleman of uncertain lineage. And so I sat in this place, and I waited for him to bring it to me, and he brought me this couple of dishes that were covered with silver covers, and he had a towel over his arm, and with a big sweep, he goes, yeah, and he takes the tops off and he puts it down, and here's this strange-looking stuff, which had a curious milky quality to it. It had a kind of a white, milky sauce, and it was lukewarm. It wasn't hot, it wasn't cold, it was oddly lukewarm, apparently, which is exactly the way you should have turtle eggs, or turtle heads, or gopher livers, or whatever it was that I was eating. And so I start to eat this thing, and I knew, of course, immediately that I was in the presence of an alien society. This was not the kind of thing that people would eat. These are people that are vaguely preserved from an ancient age. And yes, you know that there are people who are still eating, living, breathing, and dying the way people did, say, 500 years ago in certain parts of the world. And food changes. Food and taste in food has changed drastically over the centuries. If you've ever read the menu of, say, Henry VIII, you'd be amazed at the stuff these people ate. I mean, the kind of things they would eat. They would eat things like boiled pigeon's feet. That kind of stuff. Dog's liver. Strange things which we don't even think in terms of eating. They would eat, like pine cone souffle. And so here I am living in that scene. I'm eating something that I know has the taste of something that Anne Boleyn would have recognized, or Count Dracula would have had for dinner. And so, when he wasn't sucking blood. So I'm knocking down this stuff, and the music is playing, and it's beginning to snow outside. They had leaded windows on top of it, genuine leaded windows. And there was not a tourist in 400 million miles at this time of the year in Innsbruck. Nothing there, just the people. And the ancient countesses have come down out of the hills to spend their few brief moments in the light when the crass tourists had gone. And here they were in this hotel, and a man was sitting, one man in the place, and he was sitting about 9 tables off with this tall, thin lady who had a face like a hatchet. And he must have been 9 feet tall, this man, and he was actually wearing, and I never thought I would, actually see this, but he was wearing one of these ribbons that went down over the chest, the red ribbons, the Order of St. Francis II, or some strange order like that is given to the Romanian cavalrymen for the last charge at Bratislava. And he's wearing this thing, and he's got snow white hair. If you can imagine a snow white crew cut, closely cropped white hair. And he is drinking wine. And here I am in the middle of this, me, fresh out of Nedick's. Fresh out of Zum Zum is about the exotic world for me. And so I'm sitting there trying to eat this stuff and trying to keep from showing my emotions, which were rather strong at the time. There was one familiar quality to this dish I was eating. At one time when I was in 6th grade, I went on a paste-eating binge. I used to eat this white library paste. Did you ever do that? And this had this is a little like LePage. There are 2 or 3 types of brands of paste, and LePage happens to be one of my favorite. It has a certain piquant sauciness, a rather brash freshness to it. There are other more classical brands of library paste, but I happen to go for the LePage, and this had a little quality that I'm sitting there eating this stuff, and the second thing I had ordered, I had pointed to 2 things on the menu, figuring that I'm going to make it both ways. You see, if one of them makes me sick, I can at least deal with the other one. It arrived and it was on fire. Whatever it was, I'd ordered something off flambeau, and it was burning away. And everybody looked, and apparently I'd ordered the local ritualistic feast that is eaten only on the day of Michaelmas. And so nevertheless, I bludgeoned my way through it, and finally I got up to leave, and I paid them in the strange local currency, which looks exactly like the kind of stuff that Count Dracula would have used, and has names like that, like Kopek and Zlotnik. And so I'm paying off, and the peasants are dancing in the streets when I go out there. There's always townsmen and peasants in places like that. They really exist, little peaked hats, and they scurry around and carry shopping bags full of bones and stuff. And so I got into my car, and I took off. And I went, this is about the strangest travel show you've ever heard. And one of the things that most people don't know about, or never talk about, I never see it mentioned much, is the curious kind of loneliness that besets a traveler. It is a very special kind of loneliness. Marco Polo talked about it. And it's a curious type. That's just what makes me believe that ultimately no genuine peace is ever going to come to man, because we are what we are, and we are a herd creature. And once we're among the other herds, we feel out of place, and incidentally, the other herd feels vaguely resentful of you. Always this way. Tourists have always been resented by the local people, no matter where they are. And so I'm driving out through the town, and it was beginning to snow. And it was snowing kind of hard, big white flakes coming down, and I couldn't really see the mountains. The mountains are just brooding over you. In Innsbruck, this town has been dropped into the middle of this great craggy mountains. These are real mountains. This is great skiing country and that, but that was all over, and this was not the scene now. This was not skiing. It's like, if you can imagine, going to Jones Beach in the middle of January. It's definitely off-season, and it's reverted to its own nature, which is genuinely dangerous. And so I get in this car, and is it getting cold, and the temperature was dropping. And I knew I had to get to this town. I was on my way to Munich, which by real automobile is about 3 miles. But by this roller skate that I'm driving, it's, who knows? I should have said 3. Did I say 3 miles? I meant 3 hours. It's about 3 hours from Innsbruck to Munich by genuine car. But by this thing that I was driving, God knows how long. I had to get out every once in a while and wind up the rubber band in it, and it was a little tiny thing. And so the wind is blowing. The Germans have specialized. They did after the war. They specialized in making odd little automobiles, like the Messerschmitt. You ever seen the Messerschmitt, the little 3-wheel car that's built just like a Messerschmitt? Has a little plexiglass bubble. It's got about a 2.5 horsepower engine in the back end there, and it's 3 wheels. The Lloyd, another strange little car, the Go-Go-Mobile, and a few others of that type. So I'm driving along in this little car, going up, and you could feel the temperature changing as you went up into the mountains, and it's getting icy cold. Gee, I'm really freezing. This has got a heater that couldn't have kept a hummingbird warm, and a little tiny heater there going away, and gasoline is pouring in from the back of it somewhere. I could smell the fumes, and the mountain is rising up straight on either side of me like a giant black cliffs, and it is really getting dark now. And by the time I was out of Innsbruck, about 2, maybe 3 hours, it is so black. I mean so black. And when you get into the middle of the Black Forest in the mountains, I mean there's not a light. I mean it is black. The moon can't even get down into that. And you have this feeling that you are now tasting hell. And the cars go, putting along there. And at one moment happened to me that kind of made up and pointed up and even created another layer of loneliness. As I'm driving, nothing but blackness around me, the feeling that this road is endless and I'll never, that actually I've died and I'm in some terrible, I'm paying now for my sins, and blackness is coming at me, and my 2 little yellow light bulbs are struggling like 2 little candles, and I can see about 3, maybe 4 feet ahead of the car, this dim yellow light, when suddenly I had just gone around a pass, like a big bend. Now, I don't see the sides. I know that there are sheer drop-offs, cliffs on either side of me, but I'm just driving, and trying to stay right on this road, when I suddenly see in my rear view mirror, which was about the size of a quarter, I see in the rear view a sudden flash of light, and I see coming around this bend back of me, I see these 2 headlights, and underneath it, this is a typical European sight, under the 2 headlights are 2 bright amber fog lights. They go for that kind of stuff in Europe, fog lights, amber lights, green lights and stuff all over their cars. And I see these 2 things, and they came on me so fast I thought, this is it, he's going to get me. I mean, he really came up. He was coming up like hell-bent for election. It was like being buzzed by a zero or something, see? And he goes, and all of a sudden I see the light swerve because he spotted me. I had a little taillight behind in the back of his car that was it was a ridiculous taillight. It was about the size of a tiny love bead, and it shed a little wee flickering yellow light, and he came whipping up to me, and I saw him all of a sudden catch, and I was ready, I figured, well, this is it, I'm going to get eaten up by a Ferrari. That's the end of me, see? Well, he saw me at the last instant, and I saw the light swerve, and he just went right around on the inside of me. He just cut inside, and he accelerated. He goes, and he's gone into the darkness. And I caught a fleeting glimpse. It was a Lancia. A fleeting glimpse. This flying blonde hair, this fantastic chick, and away they go. It's a real European scene. Blackness. I mean, obviously some decadent film star is on her way to Munich with a decadent set designer for an unbelievable weekend among the gnomes. And off they go. And I am once again plunged into Stygian blackness. Now, I hope this isn't boring you, but when I think of Count Dracula, this all comes back to me. And we started to go uphill. When I say we, me and this crummy little car, we're struggling uphill, and the car is barely making it. And I figure, what am I going to do if this thing poops out on me? I'll never get out of here. And who knows what's in those weeds, in those woods. There were no weeds, it was just black woods all around me. The Black Forest is about 500-foot high trees. And incidentally, this forest, in case you're curious, is a virgin forest. It goes back to the Dark Ages and is protected. And here these trees, 200, 500, they look like 500 feet high. You just see these great trunks and blacknesses. And believe me, at that point, I am genuinely seeing elves. I can see gnomes. And so I make it up over a hill, and I'm now on the straight. And I pass a little tiny sign that's buried among the rocks. My little lights picked it up, and it tells me that I am approaching Mittenwald, which is middle of the forest. And Mittenwald. And it says 2 kilometers, 2 km. Well, I'm going to be in a town anyway. when all of a sudden it happened. It's nothing. I see in the headlights, I see two eyes, tremendous eyes, directly ahead of me. I mean, they were red. I mean, they were just glowing out of the darkness. Well, they were directly ahead of me. Whatever it was, I'm going to hit, and they were huge eyes. Well, I stop, which wasn't much of a trick with this car. Just stick your foot out and drag it a little bit, and I stopped. And these two eyes are looking at me. And there I am in the middle of the Black Forest. The shades of Dracula, all of it hanging over me. And I see this eye, these big ones, big eyes. Just sort of hanging about, looked like 20 feet off the ground. It starts to move. Whatever it was moving a little to the left. And I'm sitting scrunched down in the car and figuring, should I put this damn thing in reverse, try to get out of here? Putting this thing in reverse is ridiculous, nothing's going to happen. So I'm just sitting, and then I began to see it in the gloom. Standing right in the middle of the road, not more than 7 or 8 feet ahead of me, is the biggest, most evil, sinister, there's no animal, we don't have an animal quite like it in America. Have you ever heard of a red, well, it's not a reindeer, a stag. Have you ever heard of this, of the alpine stag, the giant Tyrolean stag? Here is this immense animal with a set of antlers that must have been 40 feet across, and his eyes were picking up the light from my two little yellow headlights. And it was a gigantic red stag. And he's just standing there looking at me. And there we were. He must have gone a good half-ton. Tremendous animal. And he is red. They are red. You can see the coat on him is a dark sable red. Huge animal. And we just looked at each other for about 2 minutes, and I'm just sitting there sweating. Now what? I could just see the headlines back home. Shepherd gored by mad red stag in Black Forest. Lost. What the hell? This is a way to go, And with that, the stag slowly turns, just kind of does a slow circling cartwheel, and now he is broadside to me. I've never seen an animal in my life like this. Tremendous. He went from one side of the road to the other. And then he turned all the way, and now his rear end is facing me, and he had the rear end, believe me, of a Sherman tank. And he slowly starts to trot down the middle of this cobblestone road. He's trotting away. Well, I put the car in gear, and I followed him. It's the only thing I could do, either that or sit in the darkness like a fool. And I wasn't going to, try to go around them. I mean, he could have picked this car up with one flick of his horn. I'd have been 17,000 miles down the gorge. So I drove right behind him, and he just walked, cluck, 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 cluck. I could hear he had hoofs. I could hear the hoofs going, cluck, 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 cluck. He just sort of trotting, cluck, cluck. What a powerful animal. He looked like if you can imagine a moose that's taken to wine drinking. He's changed a bit, and he's going cluck, 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 cluck. And for a good half mile, I follow this enormous animal. And then suddenly, without any warning, in fact, he did it like magic. It was just an amazing thing. I've never seen any animal do this. He disappeared. Just, he's gone. Just gone. He was right in my headlights. 1 minute, and the next minute, he's gone. He's in the Black Forest somewhere, I hope. Just gone. Then I really got scared. I figured he's going to come out, And I stepped on the gas. I throw this thing in a second, and I start to pick up power, when suddenly I'm in the middle of Mittenwald. This little tiny place that looks like it's made of ancient Germanic lanterns. And you could see little glowing lights and leaded windows. And a church, a curious little square. And it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, and believe me, towns in the Tyrol are shut up at 1 o'clock in the morning. There is nothing. When I got out of the car, I was so cold, and I walked down the middle of the street. You could hear your footsteps, and my footsteps are echoing from one end of the town to the other. And I had this sense, that behind the windows there were Santa's helpers somewhere, and they were making gingerbread men. And someplace in the middle distance was the evil witch who was putting people into ovens. And what's his name? The bearded Rumpelstiltskin is preparing another outrage against mankind. And Bluebeard is somewhere off in that house way up there in the hill. And it was at that point that I began to suspect that maybe there was a Dracula. Maybe there is a Dracula. There's a lot of things in this world, friend, that you haven't seen yet.